All right, let's dive in. So, today we're talking about praise junkies. These are those people that are always looking for the next compliment. And we want to talk specifically to leaders today. So, if you manage people, you're an HR, a manager, a business owner, I want to teach you how you might unintentionally be creating an environment that breeds more of these praise junkies and what we can do to get people to work a little bit more independently without seeking out compliments all day long. So, my name is Megan Wollerton. I am the owner of Life Force Wellness. I currently hold certifications as a personal trainer, a health coach, nutrition coach, corporate wellness specialist, positive psychology practitioner, and I am certified in stress management, sleep, and recovery. And by the end of this month, I should also have a certification in advanced change psychology. So, as I continue to learn and grow my library, I'm happy to share that with you. This is one webinar out of a collection that we're running on Eventbrite. So we have two collections for free webinars. We're doing a webinar a week, and they alternate between topics that are more geared towards leadership and then ones that are more generalized wellness. So if this is something that interests you and you'd like to check that out and see what other topics are coming up, please go back onto Eventbrite and you can find our collections there. But 30-minute free webinars just to share information and ideas. So today we're going to be talking about praise junkies. And the reason we're talking about this is because as I'm working with leaders and business owners and HR professionals, some of the things I'm hearing that is a struggle right now is a lot of people are concerned about giving feedback. They have this feedback avoidance. And we're going to talk about some of the reasons why maybe people aren't comfortable giving positive or negative feedback. I see a lot of fear of failure. So, one of the workshops we're doing next week for the wellness series is Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, reframing those negative thought patterns. That has been a very hot topic. In fact, we're doing that one tomorrow and it is completely sold out. So, this is definitely something that has been at the forefront is people's fear of failure and those negative thought patterns that they're having. And to help with that, a lot of managers are almost pushing a low accountability. They don't want to be too strict. They want to be empathetic to their employees. And so they're kind of like coddling them, not really keeping them accountable to certain tasks. We're also seeing validation dependence. So this is those employees that are coming to you going, "Hey, did you see what I did? Am I doing this right?" They're just constantly looking for validation for their job, for the tasks that they're doing. And this can cause a lot of disruptions in the workforce. And then we're seeing also a disengagement after criticism. I'm hearing from a lot of people, "Hey, I sat down, I did a performance evaluation with an employee, or I had to criticize them or correct a behavior, and now they're totally disengaged. I don't know what to do with them, or they quit after I criticize them." And so we're going to talk about, some of those things that might be going on in the workplace that you think is helping, but are actually creating a dependency and actually causing more of these issues. So, first and foremost, what is a praise junkie? So, this is that person that's always looking for praise and validation. And it is a little more common in the younger generations, and it makes sense. The social media generations, the ones that are always after the likes, the follows, the shares, if they don't get enough likes on their selfie, they're going to snap another one. They really are looking to see that, they're still valid there, that the work that they're doing is still good. Maybe there's some nervousness. There might be some things in the background like imposter syndrome, and they need external sources to tell them that they're doing a good job. And that praise that you give them when you tell them, "Good job, high five, I appreciate you doing that work," it helps them to internalize that and determine their worth. Maybe they have a low self worth, low self confidence. And the problem is, if they are not given proper praise, they will shut down. If they're not validated on a regular basis, they may shut down. Now, this is really bred from an idea of a fixed mindset. So we have fixed mindset and growth mindset. And some of you may be familiar with this concept, really popularized and made common knowledge by Carol Dweck. So, highly recommend her book, The Psychology of Success. It really goes over growth mindset and the research behind it. And what she found is that people who have a fixed mindset, they believe that, you know, their skills, their abilities, their intelligent, they're all static. Either I'm born with it or I wasn't born with it. I'm either very intelligent or I'm not. I'm skilled in a certain area or I'm not. And we also can kind of breed this when we do certain things like personality tests. So you'll hear people say, oh, I'm a Scorpio, or I'm a type A, or I'm this on the Enneagram, or this in the disc profile. And the problem is when we put static titles and labels on people, when we have that, we're actually breeding a fixed mindset. Those tools aren't bad if used properly, but if we use them as an end all be all and we are identifying ourselves and labeling ourselves as those, titles that we're putting on ourselves, it really diminishes our abilities. So what happens is people who have a fixed mindset, they usually tend to have a desire to seem smarter and more capable than what they may actually be in that moment because they're worried if they slip up, if they fail, that is a label they carry on themselves personally. And so they tend to give up whenever they face hard challenges because they don't want to seem like they're struggling or not capable. They give up very easily when there's obstacles. They're not somebody that puts in a ton of effort or practices or looks to master a skill because, again, their thinking is either I'm born with it or I'm not. They do not take criticism well. So, this is where we get a lot of that feedback of, well, I criticize them and then they shut down. They got angry, they quit, they complained to somebody higher above me about my criticism. We tend to see that more with fixed mindset individuals. And the other thing with people that have a fixed mindset, they tend to feel threatened by those who do better than them. So if you have an employee that gets promoted over another, that other employee, if they have a fixed mindset, they feel threatened. Like, I'm going to get let go. They don't value me here. And so it can really trigger a lot of stress in the workplace. Now, on the other side of this, a person with a growth mindset, they believe that they can always develop new skills. They can always grow, they can always learn. And so they actually embrace challenges. In fact, your biggest problem with an employee who has a really strong growth mindset is if you don't challenge them enough, they get bored. They persist in setbacks. So, because they're not labeled as a specific way of thinking or a specific type of person, they get very creative. They're your out of the box thinkers. They see practice as a form towards mastery. So they kind of believe that practice makes perfect and they learn from criticism. These are the people that they come to you not to be validated. They're not coming to you going, hey, did you see that thing I did? Did you see the way I handled that situation? Looking for that gold sticker. These are the people that come to you and say, hey, I got passed up for a promotion. Can you tell me why? What skills do I need to develop to get better? They're actually looking for honest feedback and they'll take the good praise along with maybe some negative criticism very well. And they see lessons of people who get promoted over them and successful people as inspiring. So these are the people that on social media will follow the Elon Musk, the Jeff Bezos, the Warren Buffetts, because they find inspiration from people who are successful, maybe somebody in their particular field. So we might actually be breeding a little bit of a fixed mindset and actually creating praise junkies by doing things in the workforce like overpraising talent. So I see this a lot. I came from the oil and gas field industry and I was one of very few females in my company. And so sometimes it was almost like management went out of their way to overpraise me because I was like, one of the few females in the workforce and they wanted to make me feel included. And so they almost overdid it. And that could breed some issues. And at that time, I did have a fixed mindset. And so I was always looking for that validation. Sometimes we swoop in and we rescue employees too quickly. We don't want them to fail. We tend to think of this with children, those helicopter parents that always swoop in and save their children. But I see this in the workplace as well. Managers will jump in and help an employee when they see them getting overwhelmed, thinking they're helping them. I don't want them to burn out, so I'll step in and help them. And rescuing them too quickly, they never really face the challenges. They're not getting an opportunity to learn and develop skills. Having hard conversations. There's a lot of managers, especially in that mid management range, that are just not comfortable having the hard conversations. They have an employee that maybe regularly shows up late, doesn't do reports well, is maybe rude to customers, and they just really are not comfortable to sit them down and discuss that with them. They also tend to praise the personality instead of the process. So they tell the person how great they are and they completely ignore the things that they've done. And that's where we're going to get into a little bit later, process praise versus personal praise. And I like to call this bubble wrap leadership. We almost develop what I also like to call coddle culture, where we're coddling our employees. We're wrapping them up in bubble wrap. We don't want them to leave. We want to retain good talent. And so we do these things out of good intentions. We're trying to keep them from burning out and feeling stressed and being overwhelmed. But in doing so, we're almost giving them too much padding. And then we're causing these issues that lead to fixed mindset and that lead to them wanting to always seek praise. And so when I talk about person praise and process praise, it's what are you focusing on when you tell them they're doing a good job? Is it you are so smart? You are such a natural. You are amazing. You're a rock star. You. That's the personal praise. And what personal praise does is it actually creates a fear of failure. So in Carol Dweck's work, she took a bunch of students and she had certain students that were given that personal praise. They'd bring home an A, A's. Oh, you're so smart. Look at you bringing home A's. And and then equated, okay, when I bring home A's, that means I'm smart. Well, what happens when they brought home B's, C's, D's, or even an F? Well, if A's mean I'm so smart, then F's mean I'm so stupid. Not that they made a mistake, not that they didn't understand, they're a failure. They applied that. The you are statements get turned into I am statements. And so when we are always trying to work at a high performance, when we mess up, we don't view it as I made a mistake. It's I'm a mistake. I'm a failure. And we attach this to our identity. So it creates that identity attachment. And this is what creates that validation dependence because we can very much get into our heads. We have a very strong negativity bias. And so our own self talk might be saying things like, I'm so stupid. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. And this is something I'm seeing time and time again with my clients. And so what they're doing is they're going to you as their leader and saying, tell me I'm doing a good job. Tell me I'm valid here. Tell me you like having me here. And so they're constantly seeking out that validation. And that's what causes that praise junkie behavior. Now, if you do process praise, you're not focused on the person, you're focused on the things you did. You worked really hard on this. You spent a lot of time in preparation. You must have studied hard. You must have taken good notes. You must have been listening well. It builds resiliency. So take those students in Carol Dweck's study that got the process praise. So there was that group that got the personal praise. You are so smart. You're so talented. And then they took another group of students and they told them things like, wow, you must have studied so hard, or wow, you must take amazing notes, or you must really listen to the teacher well. When they started to slip with their grades, they went, I need to study harder. I need to listen better. I need to take better notes. It built up that resiliency and that adaptability. As they started to make mistakes, as things got harder, they knew what it was specifically they needed to do so that they could lean into that and grow. And it made them take ownership. This is something I can do. I can own this process and get better. So we want to make sure that when we give praise, we praise the process and not the person. And I hear it all the time in the workplace, not just with children. With children, we'll hear things like, oh, you're so smart. You're going to be the next Picasso. Look at you playing basketball. You're going to be like the next LeBron James. And we just want to build them up. And this was a concept that was really popularized in the 80s and 90s because we wanted to build up kids' self-esteem. But like I said, those you are statements turn into I am statements. And now we have this generation that is really kind of stuck in a fixed mindset. They're used to getting the participation award trophies, the gold stars, and the smiley faces on the top that says, you're doing great, you're amazing. And so we're seeing how this plays out as even they get older. And I see it in the workforce because now these people are adults and they're giving the same kind of praise they've gotten. I have seen managers walk down the hall and just be like, "Hey, you're so great at this. Wow, you're a natural at that. You're such a great team player. Man, you're a rock star. High five," and they move about their day. We need to focus on that process praise. So instead of, we already had the example, you are so smart, you must have studied harder. You're gonna be the next Picasso. We might say, like, I really like the way you blended those colors. When you tell a kid that, watch them come up with new colors that Crayola hasn't even like developed yet, because they're going to be blending all kinds of new colors. If you tell a kid who's outside playing basketball, like, wow, you dribbled that ball well, guess what he's going to do? He's going to go inside and drive his parents nuts working on his ball handling skills. Same thing happens with adults. So if you go to an employee and you say something like, "Hey, you're so great at this," after they take notes or something in a meeting, instead, you say something like, "Wow, you took really detailed notes," or "The way you documented that information was great." When you actually talk about the thing they did, they tend to repeat that behavior. So even like, "You're such a great team player. Hey, I noticed how you made sure everyone understood the information before you moved on. I really appreciated that. It helped everyone stay aligned." Now they know what they need to do. Oh, checking in, making sure everyone's on the same page. Like, this gets me praise. I know what I need to do to know that I'm doing a good job. And that's the point of process praise. When you're specific in what the employee did that you thought was good, they will repeat that behavior because they know you like it. And the more they repeat it, the better they get at it, and they start developing a skill, which motivates them and encourages them to learn new skills. And that's the trick to moving someone from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. As soon as a person identifies that they had the ability to develop a skill and learn something new, you have moved them from the fixed mindset to the growth mindset. They have now adopted the idea, I can develop new skills. I can practice and get better at certain things. And that's how we shift people. Now, when it comes to giving negative feedback, here's the piece that people struggle with the most. What happens when I have to give negative feedback to somebody? First and foremost, let's address the reasons why you might not be doing that right now. So, I have heard a number of reasons people do not give feedback. First, well, I don't want to give feedback because I'm worried it will upset someone, or I'm worried I'll be seen as unfair or biased. A lot of times I'll talk to managers and they're like, "Well, I did give them feedback," and I talk to the employee and they're like, "No, we had a conversation about this," and it's like the feedback went way over the employee's head. Like, it was not clear that they were getting feedback. Sometimes we worry that if I give them feedback or I correct their behavior, that they'll retaliate. I'm going to somehow make the situation worse. I'll be seen as difficult to work with or picky. And then there's those managers that maybe they have given feedback and they've just given up now. Like, you know what? What's the point of giving feedback? It's not going to make a difference. It all comes down to how we are giving that feedback. First and foremost, first rule, do not use the word but. Whether you are giving praise or criticism, the word but is a trigger word. Anything you say at before the word but gets completely forgotten. We tend to cling to the negativity most. So even if you try to do that compliment sandwich, which needs to go, if you are somebody still using the compliment sandwich, it is time to retire it. If you're not familiar, that was you give a compliment, you give a negative, and you give a compliment. Typically you'll say something like but, and you give the negative, and then you'll go and you'll say something positive again. We're stopping that today. All right, I'm giving you a new framework today. No more using the word but when we give criticism and praise. As an example, you go to an employee and you say, "You did a great job with your presentation today, but you seemed nervous." Now all they hear is, "Oh my gosh, I look nervous. I must have looked like an idiot." They could totally tell I was freaking out. Instead of saying but, you could try things like, "You did a great job presenting. Next time, try slowing down your pace and it will help you feel more confident." Or, You did a great job presenting and you stayed calm under pressure. Don't be afraid to relax and have fun with it. So, using things like and or next time, let's also, instead of but, is very helpful. Another thing I like to do when I'm correcting any of my employees or my kids is I'll ask them, hey, that was a great presentation. How do you think you could make it better next time? What would you like to change about your presentation next time? And they may be honest and say, you know what, I was really kind of nervous. I wish I would have given myself more time to practice. Well, that's something to note, right? Asking those questions and having them come up with it, taking almost a coaching or a mentoring approach to it, is also really helpful. So, what is the new framework? If we're not doing the compliment sandwich, what am I doing when I give feedback? SBI feedback. So, how this works: S stands for the situation, set the context. Where and when did this happen specifically? Okay, we are not going, oh, you always, or you never, or every time X happens, you do. No, very specific. Where and when did this happen? What was the situation? So this is on yesterday's call, in today's meeting, very specific. Then we move to behavior. What actually happened? What they did, not who they are. So it's not in yesterday's meeting, you were so rude. In yesterday's meeting, you were neglectful. No, we're not speaking to the person. We're talking about what they did. Just like our process praise, we do the same thing with feedback. In yesterday's meeting, you interrupted Susan. That's what you did. Very factual, very logical. We have witnesses. In yesterday's meeting, you interrupted Susan. This is typically where we stop. A lot of leaders stop here. In yesterday's meeting, you interrupted Susan. I'd really appreciate it if you be more mindful in the future, right? And we leave it there and we move on and we go, okay, we dealt with it. I want you to take one more step. Talk about the impact. Why did it matter? A lot of times people won't connect the dots on why things matter. And when they have a why, they are more willing to make changes to their behavior, but they have to understand the why. Why do I need to change my behavior? What was the impact? What was the result of this behavior? So, in yesterday's meeting, you interrupted Susan and it made it difficult for her to express her ideas, and we missed out on some things, or it disrupted the flow of the conversation. That was the impact. So, situation, behavior, impact. And then you can even add a piece on moving forward. How will we deal with this? Or just end it with the can you be more mindful? Is there something we can do to avoid this in the future? What is the way forward? So there's another piece you could add on here, but for the simple framework, SBI, situation, behavior, and impact, why it matters. The other thing is that we have to look at mistakes as data. Your people are going to make mistakes. Do you allow it? That's the question. Do you allow it? Do you allow mistakes to happen and be learning opportunities? Or is this something we crack down really hard on? So if you're someone who's like, no, we don't allow mistakes, let me tell you, I worked for a company that was like that mistakes were seen as betrayals. And what that did is it created what I call a cover your tracks culture. And I'm doing a whole nother presentation on that in a few weeks. And what that meant is when somebody made a mistake, we'd hide them. We weren't about to admit to them because we could be fired over even the most simple mistake. We were worried we were going to get fired over. So we'd hide them. And then it would like metastasize like a cancer. And it would like a little mistake became a bigger issue because it metastasized for so long. A lot of blaming others, pointing the finger, like I'm not taking the blame for that. A lot of people avoided taking risks, so they wouldn't jump in, they wouldn't help. And when your people aren't willing to take risks because they're afraid of making a mistake, your company will stagnate because it will stop all innovation. So we need to make sure that we're creating a culture where mistakes can happen and be learning opportunities. I had a great manager who came to me and said, I'm allowed to make a mistake one time, but I can't repeat the same mistake twice. Because if I made a mistake, let's say I forgot to track something, I didn't put it in the tracking spreadsheet, let's just say, she would come to me, let me know that I made that mistake, and then she would schedule time to sit with me and retrain me on it. And we'd go over, how did this mistake happen? Why wasn't this done? What do you need to understand about it? Let's make sure you know how to do the process. And then I would sign off understanding this is important and I can't let this data go missing again. Usually, after a good, thorough training and a conversation, I wasn't about to make the same mistake twice. But if I did make the same mistake twice, now there were going to be some consequences to those because she has already taken the time to retrain me. I have signed off on it, and now it's an issue. And that also starts your whole paper trail for any issues you might have with HR down the road, is making sure you retrain and you have them sign off on it. But those mistakes should be coaching opportunities. And we should have some level of leniency of, okay, it's all right to make that mistake once. I will retrain you. After that, let's talk consequences. When it comes to creating a growth culture, one that does not have praise junkies, one that is innovating, we need to make sure that we are praising the process and not just the person. We need to normalize learning and mistakes. We're diving into that deeper in an upcoming workshop on psychological safety and accountability. So if you're interested in learning more about that, we have another webinar coming up. We need to give very clear behavior-based feedback. We're talking about your behavior, not you as a person. We're building resiliency instead of dependency. We need to give our employees space, not swoop into their rescue. Let them make a mistake, let them be challenged, let them figure it out and grow. And we need to coach employees instead of berating them and rescuing them. So if you want to go deeper into any of this, or you think some of this would be helpful for your organization, that is what we do here at Life Force Wellness. I take a full human approach to leadership and wellness. We do workshops like this on leadership and development, growth mindset training, feedback training, burnout prevention, coaching with individuals and teams. If you're interested in going a little bit deeper and want to set up a phone call, that is the link, just lifeforcewellness.com/free consult. Or if you go to our website, there's a book now button. Our next free leadership webinar is going to be Friday, June 5th. So that's the next one, part of the leadership collection. There's other ones coming up that are part of the wellness collection. This one is, you can't have psychological safety without accountability. So this is speaking to that, making mistakes, holding your people accountable while still maintaining psychological safety. Because a lot of times I think companies, they're hearing that term psychological safety and they're worried about burning people out. They're worried about being too hard on them, criticizing them too difficult. But we need to actually hold them accountable. And it's how we react and how we have those conversations around accountability that actually build trust. Sometimes giving people boundaries and being very clear about where those boundaries are creates almost a safety net for your people. So we're going to be talking about, really balancing support with that accountability, addressing poor behavior without creating fear, and building ownership, building trust. We'll look at the trust equation and what it means to really follow through. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to take those now. And then if you'd like to connect on LinkedIn and learn more about the series and the resources we have, my QR code is on your screen to connect. I appreciate you coming and joining me today. I hope this was helpful.